Let's dive into something that affects all of us, every single day, but we rarely ever talk about it: the Law of Torts. Think of it as the legal system's rulebook for when someone wrongs you, but, it's not exactly a crime.
I mean, really think about it. What happens when you get hurt or you suffer some kind of loss, maybe even damage to your reputation, but no criminal law was actually broken? The police aren't going to show up. So where do you go from there?
Well, the answer is a tort. It's a funny-sounding word, right? It actually comes from the Latin word tortum, which means to twist. And honestly, that's the perfect way to think about it. A tort is a civil wrong that happens when someone's behavior gets twisted away from what society considers normal or acceptable.
Okay, let's get into the official legal definition for a second. The phrase to lock onto here is duty fixed by law. This is so important. We're not talking about a promise you made in a contract. This is a basic duty that the law itself says we owe to each other just by being members of a society. So, for a wrong to actually be a tort, you need these three key ingredients. First, there has to be a duty that's set by the law, like your fundamental right to be safe. Second, and this is huge, that duty is owed to everyone, not just one specific person. And third, if that duty is broken, the fix isn't some preset penalty. Nope, a court has to figure out the right amount of compensation based on the actual harm that was done.
One of the best ways to really get a handle on what a tort is to get crystal clear on what it isn't. And that means comparing it to crime and contract law.
Let's start with crime. A crime is seen as a wrong against society as a whole. That's why the state, the government, is the one that prosecutes, and the goal is to punish the criminal. A tort, on the other hand, is a private wrong. It's between individuals, so the person who is hurt is the one who sues, and they're not looking for punishment. They're looking for compensation to make them whole again.
And this brings us to the most common type of tort out there: negligence. Believe it or not, our entire modern idea of negligence was born from one of the weirdest, most incredible court cases you'll ever hear about. It's a story that all started with a snail in a bottle of ginger beer. So, picture it. It's 1928 in a little town in Scotland. A woman named May Donahue goes to a cafe. Her friend buys her a ginger beer. Sounds pretty normal, right? Well, what happened in the next few minutes would literally change the course of legal history.
Now, here's the absolute kicker. Mrs. Donahue didn't buy the drink herself. Her friend did. That meant she had no contract with the shop owner or, more importantly, the manufacturer. And since the bottle was dark and opaque, nobody could see the decomposed snail floating inside. So after she got sick, her lawyers had this massive problem. If there's no contract, how in the world could she sue?
This massive legal puzzle led the judge on the case, Lord Atkin, to ask a question that was just revolutionary. He wasn't talking about the person living next door to you. He was asking something much bigger. In the eyes of the law, who are the people we need to consider to make sure our actions don't end up hurting them? Who, exactly, do we owe a duty of care to?
And the answer he came up with created what we now call the reasonable man standard. See, the law doesn't expect you to be perfect. It doesn't expect you to be a superhero. It just asks, what would an ordinary, careful person have done in that situation? As one judge famously put it, what would a man on the Clapham omnibus have done? The ginger beer company failed that test, and just like that, the modern law of negligence was born.
Okay, so we've covered accidents and carelessness, but tort law is much broader than that. It also gives us a way to seek justice when someone hurts us on purpose. Let's run through a few quick examples.
First up, defamation. This is all about when someone makes a false statement that tanks another person's reputation. And there's this wild case, Yusupov v. MGM, where a movie studio made a film about Rasputin. In the movie, they had a character, who was very clearly based on a real Russian princess, get assaulted by him. The court said, yep, that's defamation, and she won a ton of money. Next, we have assault and battery. Now, almost everyone uses these words like they mean the same thing, right? Well, legally, they're two totally separate things. Assault is the threat. It's the act that makes you reasonably afraid you're about to be hurt. Battery is the actual, intentional, unwanted touching. The law says even the least touching of another in anger can be a battery.
And finally, nuisance. This is a tort that I bet a lot of us can relate to. It protects your right to enjoy your own home and your own land without someone else unreasonably messing it up. We're talking about things like your neighbor blasting music at 3 in the morning or a factory down the street pumping out nasty smells. That's nuisance.
So, we've gone from snails in bottles to noisy neighbors. Why does any of this stuff really matter? What's the big takeaway here?
At the end of the day,
Tort law is really the fabric that holds a civil society together. It gives us the unspoken rules of the road for how to act so we don't harm each other. It fills that massive, massive gap that criminal law and contract law just don't cover. It ensures that for almost every wrong, there is a remedy.
And that kind of brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. The law of torts isn't just some dusty old set of rules. It's a living, breathing thing that reflects what we value as a society. And it forces us, all of us, to keep asking one of the most important questions there is. In this incredibly complex world we live in, what duty do we truly owe to each other?